This is one of the United States' oldest organized crime groups. Hi, I'm Rebecca Brayton and welcome to WatchMojo.com. And today we're speaking with author Darcy O'Connor about the history and characteristics of the Irish Mafia.
The Irish, of course, first arrived in North America in large numbers after, during the Great Potato Famine in the 1840s. Most of them settled in New York and Boston, but the Canadian ones, most of them settled here in Montreal. And the New York and the Boston Irish gangs were, very big. And this is starting at the, the early part of the 20th century. And you had 6 or 7 competing gangs in New York City alone. They were always at war with each other. If you ever saw that film, The Gangs of New York, it was very true. They were often ward bosses in cities like Chicago, Kansas City, of course, New York and Boston too, and even got people elected aldermen and mayors, and all kinds of graft and corruption. They also tended to be in the police force.
Tell us how the Irish mob differed from other mafias that we're more familiar with, like the Italian mafia.
The police have told me that the French gangs would go into a bank and they'd start shooting people and stuff like that. They had no finesse, is the way one cop describes it. Where the Irish tended to plan their robberies very carefully, or they found, instead of going through the front door and terrifying people, they'd spend all weekend tunneling under the bank and into the vault, and they had specialists among them who could open safety deposit boxes. So they'd get into the vault and then all these cherries just waiting to be picked, and so they would be robbing cash, negotiable bonds, jewelry and things like that. And that was more their style. Whereas the Italians were more, especially in the early years, were more into the heroin trade and later the cocaine trade.
What was the connection between the Irish Mafia and other crime families or groups?
The Irish controlled the port of Montreal for several decades. Any drugs that were brought into Montreal through the port on container ships and so on, they knew exactly which container, whereabouts it was in the ship and so on. And so they then would work hand in hand with the biker gangs and with the traditional Italian mafia. If they wanted to bring drugs in, they could do it through the Irish, and the Irish would get a percentage either in money or in some of the drugs that were brought in. So that's how they tended to work with one another.
Is it still functioning?
Not that much. There are still some young Turks around, Irish Turks, but their heyday really was in the 1970s through the early 2000s. And the ones that I've interviewed for this book and so on tend to be a little over the hill, long in the tooth, and they're the ones, of course, who didn't get whacked, because a lot of them did. And some of them are still in jail, but there's a few out here, retired bank robbers, if you will, and safecrackers, who I've talked to, and they, admit that, the good times, the big times for them and for the Irish was, say 1970 through 2006 or so.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.